They won't last another week, Anya murmured, her breath freezing in the rarefied 70th air. The children's hungry gaze was a dagger in her chest, and the sight of the 10 massive buffalo, each weighing over 11 pounds, was both a promise of salvation and a death sentence. With the ancient bow trembling in her aged hands and the wind howling in her ears, she took the first step onto the relentless tundra, unaware that the true danger lay not in the animal's sharp horns, but in the treacherous ice trap opening beneath her feet. And what she would find ahead would test not only her courage, but the very soul of her village. The ice cracked with a sharp, menacing sound, an icy lament that echoed in the silent vastness. Anya's heart, already hardened by so many losses and winters, leaped, but not from panic. It was the instinctive response of a lifetime lived on the edge of the abyss. Her calloused, wise feet reacted even before her mind processed the danger. She shifted her weight with the surprising agility of one who dances with death itself, finding a firmer foothold on the icy ridge forming beneath the snow. The abyss, a dark and treacherous crevice, opened and closed in the blink of an eye, swallowing the soft snow that covered it, but not her. A hissing sigh escaped her lips, not of relief, but of a deep and ancient familiarity with the tundra's treachery. She thought of Borin, her late husband, whose strong hands and gentle voice had taught her to read the cracks in the ice as if they were the lines of a book. A pang of longing pierced her, an echo of recent grief that still dwelled in her chest. But there was no time for mourning now. "For Olonko," she murmured, her voice hoarse, and Borin's memory transformed into a silent strength, a shield against the cold and fear. The wind, which had only howled before, began to whip, lifting loose snow into furious whirlwinds. Tiny ice crystals stung her wrinkled face, and visibility rapidly decreased. The blinding snowstorm, foretold by the elders, was coming. It was both an ally and an enemy, capable of concealing her approach from the buffalo, but also of swallowing her whole. In the village, little Kira, Anya and Borin's granddaughter, stood at the door of her yurt, wide eyes fixed on the figure shrinking into the growing whiteness. Her mother, Lena, tried to pull her inside, despair etched on her features. "She won't make it, child." "No one could," Lena whispered, her voice choked. But Kira, with her grandmother's inherited stubbornness, refused to look away. In her child's heart, a flicker of hope glimmered, fueled by the living legend that Anya was. Anya, for her part, did not look back. Each step was a prayer, each breath an act of faith. The cold bit at her extremities, but her mind was sharp, focused. She read the marks on the ground, not just animal tracks, but the wind patterns in the snow, the subtle signs indicating the herd's direction and the location of the natural trap she sought. It was knowledge not learned from books, but absorbed from the land itself, passed down from generation to generation. She reached a cluster of frozen willows, their twisted branches like skeletal fingers pointing to the sky. It was a familiar landmark, the starting point of her plan. From here, she would need all her cunning to lure the gigantic buffalo to the exact spot. The journey was excruciating, a constant battle against the elements and the weight of her years. Her gloved hands ached, her lungs burned with each breath of icy air. But the hungry faces of Olonko's children were the fuel that drove her, the silent promise that she would not yield. Then, through the white veil of the intensifying blizzard, she saw it, a trail of immense footprints deep in the snow. The buffalo were close. The storm was now a wall of snow and wind, and Anya knew the confrontation was imminent. Anya gripped her bow tighter, feeling the cold, familiar wood against her gloves. The confrontation would not be one of brute force, but of intelligence and patience. She knew she couldn't face those mountains of flesh and bone head-on. Her plan depended on cunning, on the dance with nature she had learned over a lifetime. The wind howled, but she would use it to her advantage. The strong, wild scent of the buffalo reached her, mixed with the smell of snow. She began to move, not towards the animals, but in a calculated semicircle, using the wind to carry her own scent and the sounds she would make. With a small piece of hare skin she kept in her pocket, she rubbed her gloves, creating a soft friction, a low, repetitive sound that mimicked the scraping of branches or the movement of small animals. It was an ancient trick taught by her grandmother to attract the curiosity or irritation of large beasts without revealing human presence. The buffalo, even in their imposing presence, were creatures of habit and primary instincts. With each step, Anya felt the tundra beneath her feet, reading the nuances of the terrain through the snow. She knew that the natural trap, a deep depression formed by centuries of thawing and freezing, now covered by a treacherous layer of soft snow over thin ice, was a few kilometers away. Her goal was to guide the buffalo there, using the storm as her veil and sound as her bait. In the village of Olonko, the blizzard swallowed the outside world. Lena had finally managed to pull Kira inside, but the girl remained by the small skin window, her eyes fixed on the impenetrable whiteness. "Grandma Anya will make it," she whispered to herself, trying to ward off the fear she saw in her mother's eyes. Lena lit an oil lamp, the flame flickering, and hugged her daughter, the warmth of the gesture a fragile comfort against the cold that seemed to seep into everything. "May the ancestral spirits guide her," Lena prayed, her voice almost inaudible. Far away, Anya felt a tremor in the ground, a sign that the buffalo were moving. They had noticed the sound. Her heart pounded, but it was the rhythm of a hunter, not prey. She slightly increased the pace of the sounds, always maintaining a safe distance, a thin line between attraction and danger. The gigantic animals, with their heavy hooves and imposing horns, began to move slowly, following the mysterious sound that seemed to come and go with the wind. Anya guided them through a ghostly landscape where trees looked like specters and rocks, sleeping monsters. At each turn, at each rise, she assessed the wind's direction, the snow's depth, the animal's disposition. She could not afford a single mistake. Her village's life depended on her precision, on her ability to read the tundra like a survival map. Suddenly, the blizzard momentarily eased, revealing the massive silhouette of the buffalo at a dangerous distance. Their small, dark eyes seemed to pierce the mist. Anya stopped, motionless, blending into the landscape. She waited, her breath caught in her throat, her body tense but her mind calm. The herd leader, a colossal male with horns like tree branches, sniffed the air. He sensed the presence, but did not identify it. Confusion was her ally. When the blizzard returned with redoubled force, Anya resumed her movement, now with a sense of urgency. The trap was near. She could feel the change in the terrain, the subtle incline leading to the depression. The buffalo followed her, slow but persistent, like walking mountains. The plan was working. The ice and snow awaited them, a silent stage for a woman's cunning and a people's despair. Anya raised her bow, not to shoot yet, but as a symbol of her determination. The hunt was about to enter its most dangerous phase. Anya felt the slope of the terrain beneath her feet, an unequivocal sign of the depression that served as a trap. The wind howled. But now it was her ally, masking the sound of her footsteps and carrying the buffalo's scent away from her. The gigantic animals advanced, their massive silhouettes barely visible through the veil of the blizzard. She knew she needed to act with surgical precision, for one mistake would mean not only her death, but the doom of Olonko. With an agile movement, she positioned herself at the edge of the natural trap, a vast expanse of thin ice disguised by soft snow covering a deep pit. The plan was risky, but it was the only one. She raised her bow, not to shoot, but to make a sharp sound, a whistle that mimicked the lament of a wounded animal. The sound carried by the wind pierced the blizzard, reaching the ears of the herd leader. The colossal buffalo stopped, its small, dark eyes fixed in the direction of the sound. Its curiosity, or perhaps its irritation, drove it forward. It took a hesitant step, then another, its heavy hooves breaking the snow. Anya watched, her heart pounding in her chest, her hands firm on the bow. When the first buffalo stepped onto the thinnest layer of ice, a deafening crack shattered the storm's silence. The animal bellowed, unbalanced, and the surface gave way under its colossal weight. It sank, trapped in the ice and snow, thrashing furiously. Anya did not hesitate. With the skill of a lifetime, she pulled the bowstring, the ancient arrow whistling in the icy air. The impact was precise, not aiming for an immediate kill, but a strategic point that would immobilize it further in the trap, ensuring it would not escape and become a threat. The scene was brutal in its necessity, yet devoid of unnecessary cruelty. It was pure survival. In the village, Kira, snuggled in Lena's arms, shivered. A distant sound, a deep bellow, and the crack of something large reached them, muffled by the storm. Lena hugged her daughter tighter, the fear in her eyes mixing with a glimmer of hope. "May it be a good omen," she whispered, more to herself than to the child. Anya, exhausted but with a sharp mind, repeated the process. One by one, she lured the remaining buffalo into the trap, using sounds, the wind, and her innate understanding of animal behavior. Each fall was a tremor in the earth, a sound that echoed the promise of life for Olonko. Her muscles burned, the cold penetrated her bones, but the image of the children's hungry faces, of little Kira, was a fire that kept her moving. There was a moment of danger when one of the buffalo, more cunning, hesitated at the edge of the trap. It sniffed the air, sensing danger, and began to retreat. Anya, with a guttural cry she didn't know she still possessed, ran to flank it, using the storm's fury to appear larger, more menacing. The animal, disoriented and startled by the sudden figure and strange sound, took a false step, falling into the trap with a deafening thud. 7 of the 10 buffalo were now immobilized in the depression, their gigantic forms trapped in the ice and snow. Anya was soaked in cold sweat, panting, but a faint smile appeared on her cracked lips. She had succeeded. Hunger would not visit Olonko this winter. Looking at the 3 remaining buffalo which had dispersed into the blizzard, she knew the work was not yet finished, but the hardest part was done. The flame of hope, which had seemed almost extinguished, now burned brightly in her heart, warming her against the relentless cold of the tundra. The flame of hope, which had seemed almost extinguished, now burned brightly in her heart, warming her against the relentless cold of the tundra. Anya knew that the 3 remaining buffalo were a different challenge. They had witnessed the fall of their companions, and distrust hung in the icy air, making them more cautious, more unpredictable. She needed a new strategy, one that depended not only on attraction, but on a deeper understanding of the fear and survival instinct that moved those beasts. As she watched the silhouettes moving erratically in the blizzard, a different, more subtle tremor ran through the ground. It was not the heavy step of a buffalo, but a deep groan coming from the frozen earth itself. Anya felt the familiar shiver down her spine, an icy premonition. The ice beneath the trap, already overwhelmed by the colossal weight of the 7 animals, was giving way further. Small cracks, invisible beneath the soft snow, began to expand silently, threatening to swallow not only the trapped buffalo, but also the integrity of the entire pit. It was an unexpected turning point, a danger that came from within the very solution she had orchestrated. If the trap collapsed completely, the buffalo could be severely injured, rendering the meat unusable, or worse, the ice could break uncontrollably, creating an even larger and more treacherous abyss. Anya squinted, her mind racing with urgency. She could not risk the loss of all that vital sustenance. The village depended on every pound of meat to survive the harsh winter. In Olonko's yurt, Kira, who had fallen asleep in Lena's arms, woke with a start. A low, continuous sound, like a distant lament from the earth, seemed to vibrate through the yurt's skins. Lena, who had been dozing sitting up, opened her eyes, her heart tight with renewed anguish. "What was that, Mother?" Kira asked, her voice small, full of childish apprehension. Lena shook her head, speechless, the sound seeming like a somber omen, a warning from the relentless tundra itself. She pulled her daughter closer, the warmth of their bodies a fragile refuge against the uncertainty that hung in the air. Outside, Anya realized she needed to stabilize the trap before attempting to capture the last buffalo. Her original plan had focused on luring them, but now the priority was to preserve what had already been achieved with so much effort. With an agility that belied her advanced age, she began to search for large rocks and sturdy branches, half buried in the snow. Each piece of material was heavy, and the effort was immense, but Anya worked with fierce determination, driven by an unwavering purpose. She dragged them and positioned them strategically around the most vulnerable edges of the trap, trying to distribute the weight and reinforce the ice that still resisted the pressure. Her fingers were numb, pain spreading through her arms, but she did not stop. The image of her village's hungry faces, the future of little Kira, was a silent mantra in her mind. She could feel fatigue settling deep in her bones, but the adrenaline and urgency of the situation kept her moving, tireless. The wind continued to howl, but Anya now ignored it, focused only on the monumental task ahead. Each rock placed, each branch fitted was a small act of resistance against nature's fury, an effort to protect the promise of life that the buffalo represented. The three dispersed buffalo, in turn, seemed confused, but no longer attracted by the sound. The imminent danger of the trap becoming unstable was the new and treacherous obstacle. Anya looked at them, then at the unstable trap. Time was running out quickly. She needed something that would draw them away from immediate danger, but not make them flee completely into the inhospitable vastness of the tundra. An audacious plan, born of despair and ancestral wisdom, began to form in her mind, one that would require all her courage and an unexpected sacrifice. She could not fail. Olonko's life depended on it. Anya, her hands numb and body exhausted, pushed a heavy rock to the edge of the trap. The ice groaned under the weight of the 7 buffalo, and the sound was a sinister lament that seeped into her bones. Every fiber of her being cried out for rest, but the image of Kira's hungry eyes and Olonko's other children was a whip that drove her on. She felt a new, more intense vibration coming from below. A long, thin crack, like a spiderweb, appeared in the snow, spreading rapidly. It was the confirmation of her worst fear. The trap was giving way. If she didn't act fast, all her effort would be in vain, and the village would lose its vital sustenance. The 3 dispersed buffalo watched from afar, their dark silhouettes against the whiteness of the blizzard. They no longer approached the sound, but they also didn't move away completely. Their cunning was a new challenge. Anya knew she couldn't lure them into the main trap without risking a total collapse. She needed something that would draw them away, but still keep them within reach. It was then that the audacious plan took shape in her mind. A sacrifice, not of a precious object, but of her own safety. She would need to expose herself, use herself as bait, to guide the animals to a different location. A smaller depression, she knew, about 500 meters away. It was an immense risk. If she failed, she would be crushed or lost in the blizzard. But Olonko's life was worth any sacrifice. In the yurt, Lena tried to calm Kira, who continued to hear the distant lament from the earth. "Grandma is strong, my love," Lena whispered, though doubt gnawed at her own heart. She lit another oil lamp, trying to ward off the shadows that seemed to grow with the sound of the ice. Little Kira, with wide eyes, clung to her mother, feeling the tension in the air. Anya took a deep breath, the icy air burning her lungs. She unstrung her bow, carefully leaving it in the snow beside the main trap. She wouldn't need it for this part of the plan. Her weapon now would be her voice and her movements. She began to move, no longer hiding, but revealing herself. She walked deliberately towards the three buffalo, maintaining a distance that would make them feel her presence, but not directly threaten them. She began to sing an ancient song of her people, a melancholic lament that spoke of the tundra's vastness and her people's resilience. Her voice, hoarse and tired, carried the strength of generations. The buffalo stopped, their large heads raised, listening to the strange and unexpected sound. Anya's song was not a hunting cry, nor a predator's roar. It was something they had never heard, something that awakened a primordial curiosity mixed with a hint of caution. She continued to sing, moving slowly, guiding them away from the main trap and towards the secondary depression. Each step was a prayer, each note a thread of hope. One of the buffalo, the youngest and most impetuous, began to follow her, hesitant at first, then with a firmer step. The other two, though more cautious, followed the leader. Anya felt a shiver of fear and triumph. The plan was working. She was alone, exposed, in the midst of the storm, attracting three mountains of flesh and bone with her voice and her courage. The secondary depression was in sight, a smaller fissure in the landscape, disguised by snow. She knew the ice there was thicker, but still, it would be a challenge. Anya increased the pace of her song, her voice rising in a crescendo of emotion. She could feel the warmth of her village, the smell of smoke from the yurts, the laughter of the children. It was for them that she was there, facing the cold, the danger, death itself. The buffalo were a few meters from the new trap, their eyes fixed on her. Anya took one last step, and then, with a cry that tore through the blizzard, she threw herself to the side, out of the animal's path. As the first buffalo stepped onto the edge of the depression, the sound was less thunderous than before, but still a dull thud that promised Olonko's survival. Anya, panting, watched the animals fall one by one into the secondary trap, unharmed but caught. She had succeeded. All 10 buffalo were now under her control. The sacrifice of her safety had been worth it. She smiled, a tired but victorious smile, as the blizzard continued to howl around her. Her body trembled, not only from the cold, but from exhaustion. The adrenaline subsided, leaving her with a deep weariness that pulled her to the ground. Her hands, cracked and numb, barely felt her gloves. Her lungs burned with each breath of icy air, and her vision was blurred by fatigue. She sat in the snow for a brief moment, feeling the silent vastness of the tundra, the only sound, the incessant lament of the wind. But rest was a luxury. The buffalo were trapped, yes, but the meat was not in the village. Butchering and transporting 10 animals, each over 0 pounds, was a monumental task, almost impossible for a woman of her age. A pang of despair threatened, an echo of loss, but Anya pushed it away. She had promised life to Olonko. The promise was stronger than weariness. In Olonko's yurt, Lena felt faint relief, but worry gnawed at her. The sound of the buffalo falling had ceased, a sign. Kira, now calm, slept in her lap, her face serene. Lena stroked her hair, her eyes fixed on the entrance. "She'll come back," she whispered to herself, seeking conviction. The community gathered shared the same anxiety. The younger hunters, ashamed, felt admiration and guilt. They knew Anya risked everything for them. Anya stood up, firm resolve in her gaze. She needed help. She couldn't do this alone. How to signal the village through the blizzard? Fire was impossible. A shout would be swallowed by the wind. She looked at the buffalo, at the meat that represented Olonko's life. Her eyes fell on one of the sturdiest branches she had used to reinforce the trap. An idea, born of urgency and ancestral wisdom, began to form. With effort, each movement an agony, Anya dragged the branch to a rise in the snow for better visibility. Using her knife, she scraped off the bark, exposing the light wood. Carefully, she tied small pieces of hare skin to the ends of the branch, creating a rudimentary flag, a beacon of hope. It was a sign, a visible plea for help, which she hoped the wind would carry and that someone in the village might spot when the blizzard eased. Each tie was an act of faith, a link to her community. Her fingers were almost frozen, the pain stinging, but the image of Kira and Lena, of the hungry faces, was the warmth that drove her on. When she finished, she raised the branch with both hands, planting it firmly in the snow, a gesture of defiance to the tundra. The flag fluttered, a point of hope. Now, all that remained was to wait. And as she waited, she knew she couldn't stand still. There was work to be done, a first cut, a symbolic gesture that the hunt was over, and the harvest of life was about to begin. She picked up her knife, the familiar weight in her hand, and approached the first buffalo, her mind focused, her heart full of determination that defied her age and the cold. Anya, knife in hand, approached the first buffalo. The animal, immobilized in the secondary trap, breathed in heavy puffs that mingled with the steam of the icy air. It was not an act of gratuitous violence she was about to perform, but an ancestral ritual of respect and necessity. With a precise and experienced movement, she made a superficial cut on the animal's thick hide, not to wound deeply, but to begin the skinning process, a job that would require many hands and hours, but which was the crucial first step to transforming the hunt into sustenance. Her fingers, though numb with cold and tired from effort, moved with the memory of countless winters, the thick hide slowly yielding to the sharp blade. Each movement was a silent prayer of thanks to the creature that gave its life for Olonko's survival. Meanwhile, in the village, the blizzard's fury began to subside. The wind, which had previously howled with relentless ferocity, now seemed to merely sigh, revealing a pale grey sky through the sparse clouds. Lena, who had briefly dozed with Kira nestled in her arms, felt a sudden, inexplicable warmth spread through her chest. Something had changed in the air, a lightness that replaced the storm's oppression. She carefully stood up, walked to the yurt's entrance, and peered out, her eyes scanning the white, desolate landscape for any sign, any indication of the venerable Anya. It was then that she saw it, a dark speck, almost imperceptible against the white vastness, fluttering in the distance. It was not a wind-twisted tree, nor a snow-covered rock. It was Anya's flag. Small pieces of hareskin tied to a sturdy branch danced in the diminishing wind. Lena gasped, a warm tear streaming freely down her worry-etched face. It was a sign of hope that Anya had succeeded. She ran out of the yurt, shouting, her voice choked with emotion, but clear enough to be heard by her neighbors. She did it! Anya did it! She's there! The other villagers, who had been gathered in their yurts listening to the sound of the wind and waiting with heavy hearts, rushed out. Their faces, previously marked by anxiety and hunger, now turned in the direction Lena pointed. Their eyes followed her gaze, and they too saw the flag. A murmur of awe and relief ran through the small crowd. The younger hunters, who had failed in their own attempts and felt the weight of shame, now experienced a mixture of deep admiration and a renewed sense of purpose. Anya, the elderly widow, with her ancestral wisdom and unwavering courage, had done what they, in their youth and strength, could not. Without hesitation, the strongest and most experienced men of the village, led by a young hunter named Boris, began to prepare. They gathered their sleds, sturdy ropes, and the necessary tools for the difficult work that awaited them. The shame of before had transformed into a fierce determination to help, to honor Anya's sacrifice, and to ensure everyone's survival. Lena, with Kira still asleep, but now with a serene smile, watched them leave, a new flame of hope warming not only her heart, but the entire village of Olonko. Anya, still working on the first buffalo, felt a change in the air, a distant yet unmistakable sound of human voices and the creak of sleds on the snow. She raised her head, her eyes welling with gratitude and relief. They were coming. Her village was coming. A true, deep and exhausted smile lit up her wrinkled face. She was no longer alone. The human connection, the altruism of her people, was the true warmth that melted the ice in her heart. Hunger would be driven away, and with it, despair. The triumph was not hers alone, but theirs together, facing the relentless tundra. The flag fluttered, a beacon not only of help, but of unity and resilience. Anya, her eyes welling up, watched the approaching figures, growing in size and clarity through the dissipating blizzard. It was them, her people. The sound of sleds and voices became clearer, a melody of salvation amidst the icy silence of the tundra. Warm tears streamed down her wrinkled cheeks, mixing with cold sweat and snow. She did not try to hold them back. They were tears of relief, of gratitude, of a deep connection that transcended words. Boris, the young hunter leading the group, was the first to reach her. His face, previously marked by shame, now radiated a reverent admiration. He knelt in the snow before her, a gesture of respect Anya had not expected. "Grandma Anya," he said, his voice choked, "we have come." Behind him, the other men of the village, with their tired faces and eyes full of new hope, began to unload their tools, sharp knives, axes, ropes, and additional sleds. The air filled with the buzz of voices, the crunch of snow under boots, and the metallic clang of tools. Lena and Kira arrived shortly after, wrapped in thick furs. Lena ran to Anya, embracing her with a force that made her sway. "Mother, you're safe!" she exclaimed, her own tears streaming. Kira, with her large, curious eyes, looked at the gigantic buffalo, then at her grandmother, an innocent, radiant smile lighting up her face. "Grandma brought food," she said, her child's voice full of joy. Anya knelt, hugging her granddaughter, feeling the warmth of her small body, the smell of home. This was why. For this warmth, for this innocence, for this promise of a future. Anya, though exhausted, felt a renewed energy. The presence of her village was a balm for her weary soul. She composed herself, straightening her posture, and began to give instructions. Her voice, though hoarse, carried the authority of one who knew the tundra's secrets. "We need to work fast," she said, pointing to the buffalo in the main trap. "The ice is giving way. First, we'll stabilize the edges with more rocks and compacted snow. Then we'll begin the skinning. 2 men on each buffalo, carefully so as not to damage the meat." The younger hunters, previously hesitant, now worked with renewed vigor. Boris, in particular, followed Anya's instructions with impressive dedication, learning from every movement of the elder. He observed how she indicated the cutting points, the best way to handle the thick hides, the deboning technique that minimized waste. There was no longer shame in his eyes, only a deep respect and a desire to absorb ancestral knowledge. The village women, led by Lena, began to organize the improvised camp. They lit small, wind-sheltered fires, melted snow for water, and prepared hot tea, which they offered to the men and to Anya, whose hands trembled slightly as she held the mug. The liquid warmth was a welcome comfort, warming her from the inside out. The work was arduous and relentless. The 70°C cold was a constant presence, burning exposed skin and stiffening muscles. But the community worked in unison, an orchestra of coordinated efforts. The sound of axes cutting the ice to free the animals, the tearing of knives through hides, the dragging of sleds laden with meat, all blended into a hymn of survival. Anya supervised, her eyes attentive to every detail. She corrected a posture, suggested a different cut, shared an ancient legend that spoke of the buffalo's generosity and the hunter's responsibility. She was the pulsing heart of the operation, the living memory of her people. With each buffalo processed, the mountain of meat grew, and with it, the certainty that Olonko would live. Hope, once a small glimmer, now radiated, warming the icy tundra with the heat of human connection and triumph. The village, united, transformed the miracle of the hunt into life. The sun, a pale disk in the grey sky, barely managed to penetrate the curtain of snow still dancing in the air, but visibility improved with each hour. Under Anya's tireless guidance, the village of Olonko worked with impressive synchronicity. The sound of axes breaking the ice to free the buffalo from the traps echoed across the tundra, mingling with the tearing of knives through thick hides and the murmur of voices. Every muscle in Anya's body screamed in protest, but she moved among the groups, her eyes fixed and penetrating, ensuring that every cut was precise, that no part of the precious sustenance was wasted. She demonstrated with her own hands, even if trembling, the best way to separate meat from bone, the ancestral technique for preserving organs and fat, vital for survival in the harsh winter. Boris, the young hunter, was an attentive shadow beside her. He observed every movement, every gesture, absorbing the knowledge with a humility he had previously lacked. His eyes, once full of shame, now shone with deep respect and a thirst for learning. "Grandma Anya," he asked, his voice low, "how do we know what to keep and what to discard?" Anya stopped, turned to him, and with a tired but warm smile, touched his shoulder. "Every part has its purpose, my son. Bones for tools and broth, fat for energy and lamps, hide for clothing and shelter. Nothing is wasted in the tundra, for the tundra gives us nothing for free." While the men dedicated themselves to the meat, the women, led by Lena, maintained the improvised camp. Small, wind-sheltered fires crackled, warming herbal tea and broth that they offered to the exhausted workers. Kira, with her curious eyes, helped collect small branches, feeling part of that great collective effort. Lena, her hands busy but her heart light, watched Anya from afar. The elder's strength and wisdom were a beacon, dispelling the shadows of despair that had hung over the village. With each buffalo processed, the mountain of meat grew, carefully stacked on the sleds that would be used for transport. The air was heavy with the smell of blood and the steam of breath, but also with the comforting aroma of tea and fire smoke. The 70 Wondersusi cold continued to bite, but the warmth of teamwork and renewed hope seemed to warm everyone from the inside out. Faces were smudged with soot and blood, hands cracked and numb, but eyes shone with unwavering determination. When the last buffalo was finally deboned and its meat stacked, a collective sigh of relief and triumph ran through the group. 10 buffalo, each over 11,000 pounds, had been transformed into a treasure of life. Anya, standing beside the immense pile of meat, felt her legs give way. Exhaustion was overwhelming, but the smile on her face was radiant. She looked up at the sky, which now began to show a light blue hue through the clouds, a sign that the storm was truly moving away. Boris approached, offering her a mug of hot tea. "We did it, Grandma Anya," he said, his voice full of an emotion he didn't try to hide. "Thanks to you." Anya took the mug, feeling the warmth in her frozen hands. "No, my son," she replied, her eyes welling up as she looked at her village, at each exhausted but victorious face. "We did it, together." The work of loading the sleds began. The meat, frozen and heavy, was carefully tied, forming piles that challenged the capacity of the sleds and the strength of the men. It was a Herculean effort, but each one pulled with renewed energy, driven by the sight of their families and the promise of a future. The journey back to the village would be long and arduous, but they would make it together, carrying not only the meat, but the rekindled flame of hope and resilience, a silent testament to the power of human connection in the face of the relentless tundra. The journey back to Olonko was a testament to the village's resilience. Each sled, laden with frozen meat, was pulled by exhausted but strong men and women. The 71°C cold bit, but the warmth of unity and hope warmed every step. Anya, sitting on a sled with Kira in her lap, watched her people. Her eyes, once heavy with worry, now shone with deep and serene satisfaction. Boris, beside her, pulled a sled with determination, his broad shoulders carrying pride and responsibility. At each turn, the murmur of the village became audible. Upon seeing the yurts, shouts of joy and relief erupted. Elders and children ran to meet the sleds, their faces lit up by smiles and tears. Lena helped Anya down, a tight embrace sealing their reunion. Kira, buzzing with excitement, pointed at the meat. "Food, Grandma! Lots of food!" The village mobilized to unload the sleds. Women with sharp knives cut portions of meat for immediate preparation. The smell of fresh meat and the steam of hot broth soon spread, a long-forgotten aroma that promised the end of hunger. Fires, lit in each yurt, crackled with new intensity. Children, previously pale and silent, now ran and laughed, their energy renewed. In the main yurt, Anya sat beside Lena and Kira, watching the community eat. She barely touched the meat, her heart too full. The sight of satisfied faces and laughter was her true sustenance. Boris approached, offering her a bowl of broth. "Grandma Anya," he said sincerely, "you saved us. You showed us the way." Anya smiled, taking the bowl. "I did nothing alone, my son. It was us, together. Ancestral wisdom guided us, and the unity of our people strengthened us." That winter, which promised to be the cruelest, transformed into a testament to Olonko's resilience. The meat of the 10 massive buffalo not only staved off hunger but provided provisions for the coming months. Hides became clothing and reinforced the yurts. Bones, tools, fat, fuel and food. Nothing was wasted, a reminder of the tundra's generosity and the importance of living in harmony with it. The village's spirit flourished. The younger hunters, inspired by Anya and guided by Boris, now prominent, trained with new fervor. They learned to read the signs of the snow, to understand the wind patterns, to hear the whispers of the tundra. Shame gave way to respect, and despair to hope. Anya, the venerable widow, was no longer just an elder. She became a living symbol, guardian of ancestral wisdom, the flame that rekindled faith in Olonko. Her presence was a beacon, a reminder that even in the most adverse conditions, love, altruism, and human connection could move mountains. The village had overcome not only hunger, but despair, emerging stronger and more united. Olonko's future, once uncertain, now stretched brightly, a legacy of courage and hope told for generations. The months that followed Anya's great hunt were a period of rebirth for Olonko, a silent testament to the human capacity to rise again. The buffalo meat, carefully stored in the permafrost, ensured that no villager felt the pang of hunger, which had been such a persistent shadow. The hides, meticulously treated and transformed into warmer, more resilient clothing, reinforced the yurts against the cutting winds that swept the tundra. Bones were carved into durable tools, cooking utensils, and even small toys that the children clutched with renewed joy, while fat fueled the oil lamps, extending the hours of work and conviviality during the long winter nights. The village, once plunged into the shadow of despair and silence, now radiated a contagious vitality, an echo of laughter and the buzz of hopeful voices. Anya, the venerable widow, continued to be the pulsing heart of Olonko, a beacon of wisdom and resilience. Her yurt became a natural gathering place, where the younger ones sought her guidance and the elders shared memories. Boris, who had transformed from a shamed hunter into a respected leader, spent hours with her, absorbing every word, listening to the stories of the ancestors, learning about the unpredictable cycles of the tundra and the silent language of animals. He not only hunted more successfully, but also with a deep respect and understanding that Anya had instilled. The shame of the past had been replaced by profound gratitude and an ardent desire to honor his mentor's legacy, ensuring that ancestral knowledge remained alive. Lena, with Kira always nearby, tirelessly dedicated herself to organizing community life, ensuring that resources were distributed fairly and that everyone had their essential role in maintaining the village. Kira, who now ran through the village with the inexhaustible energy of a young hare, frequently visited her grandmother, bringing her small treasures found in the tundra, dried flowers in summer, sparkling pieces of ice in winter. Her eyes, once marked by hunger and uncertainty, now shone with the pure joy of childhood and the unwavering security of a prosperous, loving home. Anya, sitting in her yurt, watched the village's movement through the gap in the doorway, a serene smile on her wrinkled lips. The sound of children's laughter, the buzz of conversations, the smell of smoke from the fires, and the comforting aroma of food, all were music to her ears and balm for her soul. She felt the weight of years in her bones, a weariness that never completely left her, but her spirit was light, filled with a deep sense of purpose fulfilled. The pain of her husband's loss, though never completely forgotten, had been transformed into a driving force, a link to memory that propelled her to act for her people. She had fulfilled her promise not only to Olonko, but also to the spirits of her ancestors, whom she felt watching over them. The human connection, which seemed to have weakened under the overwhelming weight of hunger, now flourished with unprecedented intensity. Neighbors helped each other, families supported each other through every challenge, and the entire village operated as a single, large family, a living, cohesive organism. The story of the hunt for the 10-11-00-pound buffalo, led by the elder Anya amidst the blinding storm, became a legend told and retold around the fires, not only as a feat of extraordinary bravery, but as a vivid reminder of what unity, ancestral wisdom, and altruism could achieve against the most extreme adversities of the tundra. The following winter arrived, as harsh and relentless as the previous one, but Olonko was prepared, not only with provisions, but with an unbreakable spirit. There was no longer the spectre of hunger to haunt them, nor the oppressive silence of despair. There was the certainty of resilience, the flame of hope lit and bright in the hearts of each one. Anya, in her final years, continued to be the guardian of that flame, a beacon of wisdom and unconditional love. She had taught Olonko that true strength resided not in youth or brute force, but in the courage of the heart, the cunning of the mind, and the unwavering connection to community and to the past. The village of Olonko not only survived, it prospered, a living testament to the indomitable spirit of humanity in the face of the relentless tundra, a legacy of triumph and altruism that would be told and celebrated for many generations to come, echoing with every icy breeze that swept across vast and beautiful Yakutia. Echoing with every icy breeze that swept across vast and beautiful Yakutia, Anya's legacy deepened with each passing season. The winters, though they continued to test Olonko's resilience with their relentless temperatures and sudden blizzards, never again brought with them the same ferocity of despair. The village, once on the brink of the abyss, now flourished with renewed vitality, a beacon of life and hope amidst the relentless tundra. Anya, with her hair whiter than snow and her steps slower, remained at the heart of everything, a venerated matriarch. Her yurt, always warmed by a constant fire that crackled softly, was a sanctuary of stories and teachings, where children gathered wide-eyed to hear the legends of the tundra and adults sought advice for daily challenges. Confident in her wisdom, Kira, now an older girl, with the bright, curious eyes she had inherited from her mother and grandmother, was a regular visitor to Anya's yurt. She helped her grandmother prepare herbal tea, mend the time-worn hides, and organize the small treasures the elder carefully kept: river-polished stones, rare bird feathers, and twisted pieces of wood that seemed to tell their own stories. Kira absorbed Anya's every word, every careful gesture, every profound look. She saw in her grandmother not only the woman who had saved the village from hunger, but the living embodiment of wisdom, strength, and her people's unbreakable connection to the land. Boris, the young hunter who had transformed into a respected leader, put Anya's teachings into daily practice. He led hunts with a mixture of innate courage and learned prudence, always remembering the elders' words about respect for nature and the importance of not wasting even a fragment of what the tundra offered. The younger hunters, under his attentive tutelage, learned to read the tundra's signs with a precision that rivaled that of the ancients. They not only hunted to survive, but to honor the memory of the massive buffalo and Anya's sacrifice. With each successful return, the village celebrated not only the abundant meat, but the continuity of their way of life, proof that ancestral wisdom was the key to lasting prosperity. Lena, in turn, continued to be the pillar of community organization. She ensured that resources were well managed, that hides were meticulously treated, and that meat was properly stored in the permafrost. Her laughter, once rare and constrained by worry, now frequently echoed through the village, a joyful and contagious sound that reflected the peace and security that had returned. The connection between the villagers was palpable, a strong fabric of mutual support and affection that the harshest winter could not break. One day, an unexpected snowstorm, as violent and blinding as the one that accompanied the great hunt, struck Olonko. Winds howled like hungry spirits, snow fell in relentless whirlwinds, and the temperature plummeted to dangerous levels. But this time, there was no panic. The yurts, reinforced with buffalo hides and well-stocked, held firm. The hunters, led by Boris, had ensured that the pack animals were protected and that emergency routes were clear. The women and children gathered in the strongest yurts, sharing stories and songs, confident in the village's meticulous preparation. Anya, sitting in her yurt, felt the cold and wind trying to penetrate the skin walls. But in her heart, there was a deep and unwavering serenity. She watched Kira, who drew simple figures in the melted snow from the hearth, and Lena, who sewed with calm and skill. The village had learned. It had grown, not only in number, but in spirit. It was no longer just a matter of surviving each day, but of living fully with dignity, hope, and an unbreakable sense of community. The flame of resilience she had rekindled was no longer a small ember, but a strong, unquenchable fire, warming everyone and lighting the way. The end of the storm revealed a tundra covered by an immaculate blanket of snow, whiter and brighter than ever, reflecting the pale sun. The village emerged unscathed, stronger in spirit and in unity. Anya, looking at the vast, icy horizon, felt the presence of her ancestors, a whisper of approval in the cold wind. She had fulfilled her role. Olonko's future was secure in the hands of a new generation carrying the torch of wisdom and love. Anya's story was not just a legend of the distant past, but a living guide for the future, an eternal reminder of the power of courage, unity, and unwavering human connection in vast and beautiful Yakutia.